Oh, nice. And we have the recording. And it seems like you are the co-host, so we're good on that. Oh, hi, Sarahana.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. I think it doesn't let me start my video, but
Yeah, same.
Oh, weird.
Let me see if I can help.
Maybe you can make them co-hosts.
Yeah, let me see if I can do that. I think you are the host now officially, so. Oh, here we go. Now it should work. Perfect. Hey.
hello. Just the perfect downtime in Albany to be on this panel.
Oh, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, excited.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I'm assuming it's not really downtime right now.
No, it kind of is. It's like a limbo,
Okay.
but I was worried they were going to call conference just right as this was happening, but they called it at 4, so it's perfect.
Okay, I'm going to be going off camera, but I'll be doing the slides. So say next slide when you need a change.
And seeing some attendees that are already jumping in. I know we've got about 3 minutes until we'll start, but thanks everyone for joining. Starting to see people come in. Thank you so much for joining. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. Thank you so much. We're excited to talk to you all about building power for public power. Hi all, thanks to everyone who's jumping in, seeing lots of attendees and names here. Excited to have you here, and we're going to start in a couple of minutes, let people settle in, and thank you so much. Hi all, thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to Building Power with Public Power, which is a webinar brought to you by Lead Locally and the Climate and Community Project. Today, we're going to talk about the struggle across the United States to fight for public control over our energy system, the opportunities the recent Inflation Reduction Act offers to bring public renewables, and examples from real campaigns on the ground, including a conversation with New York State Assembly member Sarahana Shrestha. My name is Johanna Bozuwa. I'm the executive director of the Climate and Community Project, which is a progressive climate policy think tank with over 45 academics and researchers contributing to cutting-edge research at the climate and inequality nexus. I've also been advocating for ownership as a critical structural shift in our energy systems for years. And I'm joined here by my good friend and colleague, John, who is the campaigns manager at Lead Locally, a group that supports electing community leaders across the country to state and local office who are pledging to fight back against fossil fuel projects and for a just and green economy. He has worked alongside organizers and candidates across the country fighting for energy justice and public power. And last, we have our very special guest, New York State Assembly member Sarahana Shrestha, who campaigned on a progressive platform of public power, housing justice, immigration rights, and so much more. She has been a longtime organizer fighting to build public renewables in New York State. So an incredible crew of folks who are joining today. Thank you. So Batul, if you could take us to that next slide. And you'll see these are the speakers that I just talked about today. And we can head to the next one. All right, so I wanted to first situate us in why we are talking about public power today. We need to get off of fossil fuels, we need to rapidly transition to renewable energy, and have to electrify our economy. That is a huge undertaking. Energy utilities are a key actor in making that happen. They have control over electric lines that connect our houses, transmission lines that act like energy highways, and often generation, may it be fossil or renewable. And many investor-owned utilities have been major impediments to reorganizing the energy system. They've spent millions of dollars on campaigns to lower climate ambition. And not only are utilities getting in the way of solving the climate crisis, they have caused an energy affordability crisis. Families have to choose between buying groceries or paying their electric bill, and 1/3 of US households struggle to pay their utility bills. The pandemic exacerbated this chronic affordability condition, with utilities shutting people's electricity off and charging them with new heights of debt. When we layer on more extreme weather causing utility outages and unkept transmission lines causing wildfires in the West, the energy crisis becomes all the more dire. These are the conditions that have catalyzed communities across the country to fight for public power. And energy is a cornerstone of our society. It is our ability to stay cool in the summer, or cook our food, or keep our lights on in a crisis, and should be treated like a public service and a human right, not a sector for shareholders and companies to extract wealth from. Communities have rallied around public power because public ownership can kickstart the energy transition, ensure that community members reap the benefits of that transition, and ensure communities have control of the system, not corporations. So we lay out here kind of 3 different reasons that this is happening. And so in terms of the energy transition, we see that like one of the key ways that in the past decades folks have been trying to catalyze the energy transition has been largely using a neoliberal handbook, swapping out regulated monopolies over energy generation for deregulated or market-based systems. However, this hasn't gotten us exactly to the scale of the transition we desperately need. In contrast, public power could allow for far more coordinated, scaled-up effort to deploy renewable energy. In terms of economic justice, not only would public power allow for more rapid scaling up of renewable energy, it could be far easier to direct investments into communities experiencing the burden of energy affordability and the climate impacts. A more private model will look for the cheapest route or the highest value to shareholders. With public power, it's a bit of a different equation because they're compelled to action by public benefit. And last, community control. Ownership over the future energy system also means more control because instead of faraway folks in boardrooms making decisions, it can be you. It can be, people in your state house. This is not a new strategy. In fact, public power was the cornerstone of the New Deal. FDR started Rural Electrification Administration to electrify rural America where private utilities refuse to go, not seeing the profit incentive for themselves. That is why we have so many electric co-ops in the US, and that we are able to electrify rural America from 10 to 90% in 10 years, the type of scale we are talking about today. I want to recognize that not every publicly owned utility out there is a beacon of community control or renewable energy. However, the levers at our disposal as they are public institutions offer us far more latitude for change and allow us to organize more than with investor-owned utilities. Furthermore, the energy transition is an opportunity to remake the image and values of public institutions to ground them in community benefit, environmental justice, and renewable power. And if you could move us to the next slide, Batul, that would be great. Great. Okay, so how does all of this really relate to the Inflation Reduction Act? The Inflation Reduction Act was a large bill that passed last year and included $370 billion in climate action. While it's far from the scale that we really need, it does have some key provisions that could be game-changing for renewable energy and specifically public power. That is what I want to take some time to discuss right now. First, let's get back in history a little bit. In 2005, the Federal Energy Policy Act majorly expanded what has been the major driver for renewable energy development in the United States, the investment tax credit and the production tax credit. And since its introduction, this has been able to increase solar development by about 200%. But the way that it is set up squarely cut out public institutions and nonprofits who don't pay taxes, hamstringing them because they can't take advantage of a tax credit. Furthermore, many of the new solar and wind developers that came into existence didn't pay enough themselves in taxes to be able to get the full benefit of the credit. So enter Wall Street. Banks and other financial institutions are stepping in, and they're offering these complicated tax equity partnerships. These deals meant that Wall Street would be the one taking the credit and pass on some of the benefit to the ultimate end user while skimming money off of the top of the deal. Basically, what this did is create a backdoor subsidy for Wall Street and largely cut out the public from being able to finance and develop their own renewable energy. And this, in fact, has in part privatized part of our public powers energy system, where these public institutions have to rely on private developers if they wanted to add renewable energy to their system. In other words, the exact institutions, community-based groups or local government that we want to be building the future energy system couldn't. The Inflation Reduction Act actually changed this. One of the biggest things that it did was extend the tax credits for renewable energy and add new benefits. But most important for this discussion, they changed the system so that the incentive could be gotten directly. This is often called direct pay, instead of through tax incentives or complicated tax equity partnerships. This means basically for the first time, public utilities, local governments, community-based organizations can fully finance, own, and deploy renewable energy on their own on a far more level playing field in comparison to their private company counterparts. So this is a massive win for the future of public power, but it won't be a win unless we make it one. This is an incentive. There aren't any sticks associated. It is up to us as organizers, advocates, activists, and policymakers to call on our local governments or publicly owned utilities to take up this moment and make the future of energy public. If we could go to the next slide. So this is to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts, because I think there are some exciting opportunities within these new tax subsidies or direct pay, for in this case, that public power campaigns can advocate for to directly support economic and racial justice. As you'll see here in this table, the incentive is tiered. The base incentive is 6% off your energy investment, but you can get up to 60% off the installation if you use high road labor practices, utilize domestic materials, and invest in low-income communities, which is huge. And public and community groups are best suited to do the work of building renewables on low-income residential housing, and work with them to ensure that the benefits of the program flow to these residents. As you'll see in the table, some of these tiers are capped. In other words, there's a limited amount of the incentive to go around, and it will close out before the 10 years that the IRA extended the general incentives. This means that we have to start organizing public power campaigns now, urging local governments and publicly owned utilities to mobilize and ensure that the incentives are taken up in turn. The direct pay incentives aren't the only part of the Inflation Reduction Act that's relevant to kickstarting public power. There are also planning grants that local governments can apply for, and a new greenhouse gas reduction fund that will have $27 billion in financing, $7 billion of which is specifically for rooftop and community solar that could support the development of public power. In some cases, with some of this stuff, we are still waiting for the final guidance from the IRS on how these projects and incentives will be administered. So let's move to the next slide. The last thing I wanted to cover in my time is how we can build public power. What are the ways that we can activate campaigns? And who are the targets? So here are 4 ways that you could push for public power in your community. Number 1, an existing public or cooperatively owned utility. In the case that you live in a place already served by a publicly owned utility, you already have some amount of infrastructure to enable public renewables. You have to advocate for the local public utility to take up the opportunity of IRA incentives and advocate that they center racial and economic justice. Second, this is a big one. Take over your investor-owned utility. Another way to build public power is to take it over and transition it to public control. This would not only allow you to build public renewables and the generation, but have full control over the distribution system and rate setting. These campaigns take time and require a solid amount of ground game, but they are in fact possible. You can also create public renewable energy developers. This may vary by state regulation and the structure of the utility in your region, but there are opportunities to create public renewable energy developers that both generate energy for all public buildings, let's say schools, libraries, and also serve renewables to the community itself. In fact, it could subsidize and provide low-cost energy to community members in the area. In fact, there are proposals now for public rooftop solar installations to rapidly deploy rooftop solar at low cost to neighborhoods. And we're about to talk about with Assemblymember Sarahana Shrestha about the fight for the New York Power Authority to build public renewables. And last, is for us to actually push agencies like a state housing agency or a school district to develop and finance their own public power or to work with local communities on renewable energy. So with this, I am going to transition, and you can click to the next one. And I'm going to transition us over to a conversation with Assemblymember Sarahana. And we're going to talk about what it takes. I've been talking a lot about kind of the theory or the concept of fighting for public power, but she's working on the action. She's right in there, especially right now, amidst budget negotiations to to actually put this into place. So Assembly Member Sarahana Shrestha, why do you fight for public power?
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here. We are, like you said, in the middle of the budget negotiation where we are actually talking about public power. So it is simultaneously a very frustrating and exciting process that we're going through right now. I just want to start by saying this domination of private property is relatively a new thing. And the initial response to it was very strong and very violent. People rejected this idea when it was first developed. And I think that for me, it's important to fight for public power because we, at the dawn of capitalism or whatever, made a choice. Those who were in power made a choice to put profits before people, and that's not a new thing. It goes way back, and over the centuries, we have really seen the force of exploitation gain in speed, gain in scope, gain in power, to the extent that now people think that private property being the first and the foremost thing is somehow natural to us, but it's not, right? It's not natural at all. And so New York Power Authority was founded in 1931. And so we can say confidently that as early as back then, people knew that there was a need to have a counterweight to private utilities, to profiteers trying to put hydroelectricity to their, wealth-making project. So it's not new. We have known that the problem is there's an inherent conflict between a for-profit model and essential needs that people have. And right now we are in a moment where all of these crises are compounded because all of them are happening at a rapid speed with diminishing windows for us to implement solutions. And we are seeing the failure of the private market across various needs that people have, housing being a big one and energy being the other. So I think that, for me personally, the reason that I prioritize public power as really my fight is also because energy is this little wonky world where if people don't understand the details, they shy away from it. Whereas, compared to housing, for example, it's much more, even there, the sort of the financial aspect is like technical and complicated, but I don't want people to run away from energy conversations because it is so at the center of our climate fight, our democracy, our affordability crisis. So I want to make it accessible, and I want to make the conversation a larger conversation about what we have an inherent right to, and something like our energy system should never have been put in the hands of private corporations. And nobody has ever been happy other than the private corporations about this being under private control. And I'm seeing this so much in the district that I represent. So I'm very excited and to be in this fight, to have been elected for this fight, and to really play sort of a role from the inside so that I can support all of the fights that are happening on the outside.
Thank you. And we're excited you're there as well to be fighting that fight. A question kind of a little bit more in the background. What is the New York? I know you talked about its introduction and its formation, but what is the New York Power Authority? How does it work? And why isn't it building more renewables right now?
Yeah, so New York Power Authority is a publicly owned power provider that, very it's a great coincidence that it exists in New York, because now we're able to put this full platform behind it. So it was originally created to address the energy crisis that was happening in the 30s. But in its origin, it was really more focused on hydro. And that's been like sort of the bulk of the energy production that it is involved in. And over the years, it's been gotten involved in transmission and things like that. So the main thing is, I think the intention that was at its origin has of course been eroded and lost over time, and we want to bring that back. The truth is, people who ran New York Power Authority have been not fully aligned with the idea of public power, of public goods, and especially under the Cuomo administration and continuing now, we see that the people who are leading it are more aligned with the private market, with the finance world, with the fossil fuel world. And we see this great potential that is being steered towards has been steered towards the wrong direction. And given that we passed pretty bold climate goals in 2019, we want to make sure that the full potential for good that New York Public Power Authority is so well positioned to do is realized within our foreseeable future. Really now, we don't want this to be a project for another decade, because we don't have another decade. And it's not building renewables now really because of this belief, this unshakable belief in the private market and being run by the sort of people who are not fully aligned with public power, but also technically when it was enabled to build power, renewable energy in 2019, there was a cap as to how much it could build. And when I campaigned and told people about this cap, they were like, that makes no sense. Are you sure? You should double check. How can this law exist? And I was like, this law exists because the private market is always trying to create carve-outs to protect itself. It does not want competition. It touts competition. It touts competition as a reason that it should exist. But when there's actual competition, they don't want it, right? So it's like this, facade of competition. And that's really the reason that NYPA has not been put to the forefront of leading on renewable energy. But a fortuitous thing that happened is, just as we were building this full-on organized campaign around Build Public Renewables, the IRA provisions kicked in, and it was a perfect storm where even our fairly conservative governor ended up putting a version of the bill in the executive budget, which is, to me, I'm still shocked that even happened, because this opened the doors for really talking about public power. And if we really start implementing this idea in New York, and if it's successful, I think that is major for how we can take this to other parts of the country.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I think you're so right that you all are like on the forefront and really could be a great example. And would you just give us an update? I know you've been in the trenches recently, working on the budget now that the governor has included part of the Build Public Renewables in her own budget description. But where are we? Can you give us a sense of that right now?
Yes. So the main thing that the governor proposed in her executive budget proposal is basically just allowing NYPA to do it. Not mandating NYPA to fill our renewable energy gap, not mandating all these strong labor provisions that we had in our bill, and not spelling out all of the sort of thoughtful parameters that was in the bill on how you should do just and successful energy projects. She simply basically allowed NYPA to do it and left it to their discretion. And so what we've been doing since then is trying to get it to as close to the intention of our bill as possible. And, like I said, our bill was very thought through, and it was actually a fairly long bill, because it didn't want to leave out anything where there's the chances of the aspect of climate justice being sort of neglected and so on. So the main things that we have been fighting for, I'm in the assembly, and the assembly is the body that did not pass the full bill. The Senate did. So that put us in a position to really keep this campaign alive. So the main things that we tried to push for in the assembly was mandates. We absolutely need mandates, basically saying Annually, we should have a review of what the shortage is of renewable energy coming from the private market in our state, and NYPA has to build to fill that gap, right? And then the second thing we really fought for is labor provisions. There's, it's not a serious long-term commitment if we are leaving workers behind, if we are not getting their buy-in. We really need these workers who are just looking out for their families, who are just looking for their bread and butter, and who happen to be working within the fossil fuel industry. We cannot expect them to make personal sacrifices to solve the climate crisis. We have to give them the system and the infrastructure in which they can be put towards our climate goals. So this is very important for us. And so these two things are alive in the negotiations. And actually, there was a leak that came out today, I believe, in Politico that says as much, although I would caveat that so many things that change day to day, I am never optimistic, but that's where we are right now. And, some of the things that we did not win that I think should be continued struggle is the small d democratization of NYPA. Its power is only as successful as its transparency, accountability, and who we are putting on the board to run this potentially amazing public entity. And then, there's other differences in like the timeline to phase out peaker plants, and many other sort of, the smaller buckets of things, but the big top line items that we are fighting for in this very condensed budget fight, it's really a small window to get a lot done, are those two big things, which I think will put us on the right path to then make sure we are being vigilant about the implementation and so on.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I also work on a public power campaign in DC, and the labor provisions are at the core of it. So I really appreciate that you're working on that. I think we just have one last question. It's kind of a big one, but you just ran on a public power platform to get elected. I was wondering, what did it take to win? And relatedly, if other organizers are here thinking about running a community leader for office on a similar public power platform or starting a campaign generally, what would you want them to know?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I was very intentional about is, I ran in Mid-Hudson Valley, and it's a district where it's a mix of rural areas and some suburban areas and really very few sort of dense areas. But one of the things that I was really intentional about is meeting people where they are in terms of how they perceive, what the climate fight is, what the energy system is. And a lot of people don't, like I said before, don't really engage because they think this whole thing that has nothing to do with them, But what happened when I was running is in the middle of my campaign, we had this huge a billing error issue with Central Hudson, which is our distribution utility, the main utility that interfaces with customers. And they were making insane errors, like, billing people thousands of dollars, taking money from their bank, thousands of dollars from their bank without notice. And a report found them, guilty of having done a lot of these, having made all these errors. But what it allowed me to do is talk about why the problem is that we are letting this private corporation that we have very little oversight over, that the PSC can hardly regulate in the way that people want. Why at the heart of this problem is that it is a private corporation that answers to shareholders. And it actually reached a point where people are now writing to me to be like, don't ever talk about why we cannot buy Central Hudson, because we must absolutely buy out Central Hudson. And these are people who were previously not even anywhere remotely involved in the conversation of public power, So and the thing is that this energy affordability crisis is happening everywhere. In our district, it was particularly a massive failure, but it's happening everywhere. So we really need to talk to people who are not our obvious allies, about what's at stake for them. I've talked to people who were like, I'm fine with fossil fuel, but then I really had to talk about why fossil fuel is going to leave people like us behind. The fossil fuel industry is not looking out for us. Gas is always going to be volatile and increasingly going to be volatile. And meanwhile, we are stuck with all of these compounded helplessness and frustration. So I've really been trying to come to it from the perspective of like, what is the direct stake for this person that I am talking to, and I think for organizers that is really critical.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Shrestha. I think that like the piece that you really capture there is like that this is so attached to people's everyday lives. Like this isn't just a pie in the sky thing we're talking about. We are talking about energy as a human right, as something that like we deserve control over because it has so much control over our lives, if we have access to energy or not, or how much we're being billed for that energy that's crucial to our survival. So I'm just so grateful for the time that you have taken today to take us through like a campaign that has gained so much traction in the past few years and has been incredible to watch as this kind of like beacon of what could happen in New York and in other states. And I wanted to hand the floor to John here to give us some ideas about, what else is happening. We've really been able to hear about the New York campaign. What else is happening out there?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Johanna. And thank you, Assemblymember Shrestha, for being here and for running for office, which I'm about to talk to you about, and also for leading the fight that you talked about on public power and so much more. I'm here to talk to you about the elections part of this and how we win power on public power. For background, my name is John. Again, I've organized locally in DC around public power, but also in kind of electing progressives. Previously at 350, and now I'm at Lead Locally, which helps fundraise, recruit, train, and get out the vote for climate champs at the state and city level. So there are kind of two reasons I want to highlight the elections that relate to public power this year. One is these are opportunities to build public power at the ballot box that show there is exciting momentum led by local organizers across this country right now to win public ownership of the new transition to renewable energy. And also because I want to make a plug that if you are out there, I'm looking through the attendees, I know some of y'all are organizers. If you are out there and you're thinking about how to run someone in your community on a similar platform to Assemblymember Shrestha, or just to start a public power campaign, we want to hear about it. There's a small but growing community of folks who are supporting efforts to expand public power, and we want to be supporting each other. So this is a public pitch to put your name out. We can figure out how to work on this together. So there are a few elections that I wanted to point out in particular this year that are really exciting and that are we think are whether they win or not, but hopefully they're going to win, are expanding excitement and possibilities for public ownership of the renewable energy transition in this country. The first that I'll talk about is in Maine. Maine has two private utilities, CMP and Versant, that not only cost residents 49% more than their public counterparts, but have blocked work to transition the state's energy off of fossil fuels, and actually made the state the most frequent state last year in the whole country for power outages. Climate activists have put on the ballot a measure to make the Pine Tree Power Company a local consumer-owned utility that would buy out both private utilities and deliver lower cost, cleaner, and more reliable power. The concept is not only popular with voters, it actually has already passed the state legislature through a bipartisan bill that was vetoed by the governor. As the campaign builds people power on the ground, they'll need support to win against a very well-financed utility opposition. Moving on to Alaska, earlier Johanna talked about the importance of rural electric cooperatives that kind of gained momentum first through the New Deal. The country's largest state, Alaska, has a very high percentage of rural residents. And electric cooperatives play a really critical role in providing power that ensures those rural residents have reliable service. These cooperatives boards actually are there are 4 of them, and they are all holding elections this year where ratepayers will have the choice to elect champions for clean energy to represent them. We are backing there are actually 6 candidates across the state that local climate organizers have handpicked and moved forward. And this is important not only for the clean energy transition, but to wean the state off natural gas from Cook Inlet, where drillers have actually stated they intend to stop drilling by 2030. So this is a really incredible set of races where organizers are not only helping move us towards, helping move us through a democratic system towards the energy we actually need, but also, creating more reliable and safe energy for the state. And the final state I'll talk about that I hope gets y'all excited about starting a campaign is Texas. We hear about Texas mostly these days through a kind of crazy, right-wing governor, but also from the shutdowns, the utility shutoffs that we saw last year, through a really horrible electric grid a grid that is not providing for its residents. Well, climate organizers and progressive organizers across the state have really stood up to that and started proposing solutions within the vein of energy democracy that I think are really exciting. So the first one is in El Paso. Youth organizers with Sunrise El Paso, as well as a group called Ground Game Texas, led by Mike Siegel, a former congressional candidate, have gathered enough signatures this year to get a really historic initiative on the ballot in May. It's called the El Paso Climate Charter. The measure would reduce the city's emissions by building publicly owned solar on city buildings, invest in union clean energy jobs to make those, and would create a climate department that is tasked with starting with a set of studies on a variety of things, moving the city to fully clean energy utility by 2035, but some other really exciting things like what it would take for the city to municipalize all its utility. I'm particularly excited about this because this initiative not only is a great example of energy democracy, but also was led by youth organizers who saw this problem, drafted the proposal, worked with a legal team to make it possible, and then went out and got the signatures to get it on the ballot itself. And very similarly, also in Texas, in San Antonio, in 2021, with the help of the local DSA, Democratic Socialist chapter, and a few other groups, 2 incredible progressive socialist climate leaders, Jalen McKee Rodriguez and Terry Castillo, were able to win their election on strong platforms of increasing affordable housing in the city and a variety of other things, but also moving towards clean energy. And the city council already manages the municipal utility, which still relied off a coal plant. And because of those 2 champions election, the city was able to create a kind of barter with more moderate members of the city council to retire that coal plant. There are new elections this year to expand on the progressive and leftist block of that city council, because as part of that barter, they did move some of that energy capacity towards natural gas. So it's a kind of continual fight in progress, but ultimately they were able to close some of the dirtiest forms of energy use in their city because the city had direct control over that utility. And you can go to the next slide, Betul. There are some other cities on there, but I won't go into all of them. But I guess that gets to you. Earlier, Johanna talked about how the Inflation Reduction Act's benefits for public power won't be a win unless we make sure that it is one. So whether you're getting involved, you're already involved in one of the campaigns I laid out, or live there and excited to get involved in them, or you're just starting one, we really do need elected officials who are aware of these benefits and using them, or feeling the pressure from their communities to do so. So that we have an energy system that is benefiting the public and built by the public. There are a few ways that you can get involved right now, either at the ballot box or through community organizing, to build the case, to build the movement for public power. One, you can begin a campaign itself for public power for utility justice. You can begin a group that is effectively a utility watchdog that is regularly hounding your utility, whether it's state or municipal or regional, on what kind of rates they're setting for ratepayers. Are they exorbitant? How are they affecting people? That is regularly tracking, is your utility holding up to any climate plan or energy transition plans that it has already set, or is it failing at those goals? You can ask local organizers and your own questions of who regulates your state utilities. How is if you have a public service commission, or sometimes they're named differently, how are they appointed or elected? And if so, are there upcoming appointments or elections that you should be involved in or be aware of, that you can start pressuring the body that is appointing those folks around, or start preparing for an election? And if the body that is regulating your utilities is your city council, for instance, who is talking to them about rates, about the energy transition? Who is watchdogging them to make sure that they are actually taking control of your local energy and how you're using it? And around all of that, we want to help. I think Batul right now is going to put up a little poll. So if you are excited about working on an energy justice or utility justice campaign that will expand public power in your community, and regardless if you know already what you want to work on, if there's an election you want to work on, a campaign, or you just are thinking about it and want someone to help you kind of brainstorm what your opportunities are, or do the research to figure out what those opportunities are, please respond now. We will definitely follow up to schedule a call to talk about organizing together, to be connected to a local group if that already exists and makes sense. And hopefully we can get a scheme and make something happen. Cool. And you can go to the next slide. So with that, that is all of our presentation. I think I just want to thank from the bottom of my heart, Johanna, for pulling this together, and to the Climate Community Project for doing the research on how organizers and community groups can make the most of IRA benefits to expand public power in this country. And thank you so much, Assemblymember Shrestha, for coming here and for leading the fight for public power in New York. We're really excited about it and really excited for all the work you've been doing. And with that, we are going to take some questions with the 15 minutes we have left in the webinar. So if you have a question for anyone here, please just put it in the little question box, and I probably won't call you, I'll probably read it out loud and then open it up to one of us to answer. So I see we have a few already. I know this is from Pete, not Shana. So from Pete, Pete says, thank you for your leadership. In California, we are fighting hard to end the reign of PG&E's terror. And though legislators are willing to criticize them, they're terrified of PG&E's retribution and unwilling to author bills take steps towards public power. How did you navigate with your colleagues, this is for the Assembly member, against utility intimidation? How much of the details of the alternative do you have to have sketched out before you put legislation in play? So, Assemblymember Shrestha, if you don't mind taking that, would be great.
Yeah, so in New York, we're not close to buying out a utility itself, but we're starting out with the generation of renewables, which is puts us in a slightly strategic position because the opposition is not as powerful as it would be if it was the utility, but then it really opens the door for public power and having a conversation around that. I will say one thing about generally talking to colleagues is that the sad nature of our governments is that everybody, like all of the legislators, come from a place of fear, and the fear is re-election. And that is really destructive, for everything that we need to do. Sometimes you just need to replace the people who have that seat, and that's why elections are important. And specifically putting committed organizers in office is important. And even though that's sort of a very in some sense, it's like a long project, but in other sense, it's shorter than trying to, just ram through a policy without having an insider support on those things. And whether it's housing or energy, there's a huge, the huge obstacle is this defense of, private property and so on. And we see this in housing as well. And I think, so a couple of things. One is you really do need to think about elections. Is there a person who can run in this person's place? And is the district a good fit for that? The second is you got to remind the colleagues who put them in office, and it's the voters, and what does their district look like? Maybe you can organize that colleague's constituents into supporting these things and having them talk directly to their representative. But at the same time, it is also important to have the inside conversations where you need basically people like me who can lead these conversations on the inside. But what I do know is that it cannot just be one thing. We have to try every angle possible to us, and also build coalitions outside of what we typically think of our coalition. Like I think housing, energy, for example, is a good cross section for the same fight.
Thank you. That's really important, that we have to be like hitting them on multiple angles, elections within the government itself. So true. So I am going to ask a question from Roshan. We are pushing for a public renewable developer. Is that more or less restricted to states that have deregulated, i.e. not vertically integrated utilities? Asking for a Michigander who is mad at DTE and their coal plants. Sad face. Turn this to Johanna.
Yes, sad face indeed. So the way that you could fight for specifically a public renewable energy developer, that's would be if you are in a deregulated state. That's probably the best way to be able to move it forward, because in vertically integrated states, and for folks that like these are maybe new terms, basically a vertically integrated state is where your utility owns the distribution grid, the transmission, and the generation, and they don't allow for energy from other types of entities. In a deregulated state, the utility usually has control over the transmission and distribution, but not always the generation. So when you're in deregulated states, you are going to be able to create a generator specifically, and I'll basically allow a public entity to enter the market, kind of like a public option of sorts, which is in some regards what the New York Power Authority is proposing to do, is to enter into the market and building those renewable energies to get them on the grid. So this is a strategy that isn't going to work likely in a place that has a vertically integrated utility. And happy to follow up with folks if they are trying to figure out, what the structure of their particular utility means in terms of some of the pathways that we put forward.
For sure. Thank you. I am going to take a question myself, actually, from Marie Therese. Hey, DC, love that. The question is, given the long-term nature of campaigns for public power, do you have any recommendations for building energy and power around shorter-term strategic goals on the road to municipalization, or how to create a sense of relevancy, urgency, and light of the uphill battles? I'll also open it to the others, but I think one thing that I've seen work in terms of the bill you're putting forward for municipalization or some form of it is stalling. Elections only happen so often. What else can you be doing at the rest of your time? In DC previously, we ran a pledge that tracked how much municipal candidates were taking from money from our utility. And I know several other groups, there's a variety of states, California, Georgia, Minnesota, where organizers ran something like that, where it kind of helps build the pressure and show where when you're still in the process of getting enough champions in office or getting a bill together or something like that, helps, keep up the momentum and paint the picture of why, what is influencing this from happening. So that's one idea. I feel like, yeah, like that, but yeah, actually I'll open it to others. Does anyone else have a response to that?
I'm happy to jump in really quickly, and I'd be really interested in the assembly members' thoughts on this as well, as someone who's been beating the drum on this for a long time. One other place, especially because we have been handling increased shutoffs, and people are still feeling the ramifications of both of the pandemic, really, and like losing jobs, and like the fact that a huge amount of utility debt has built up, right? And so that is very much tied to how our utilities are running. Are they running for the people, or are they running for shareholders? And so I think that there are ways to attach our campaigning very explicitly to the material realities of people on the ground, and say, like, yes, we are both fighting to end this unjust debt that is on your bills, and also for the long-term commitment to municipalization, to taking over public power, so that we can ensure that this isn't happening to you in the future, and put the safeguards in so that we aren't people don't have to accumulate debt. This is seen as something that is a public good. So I think that, finding those things that, people feel in their everyday lives and can help us to build, the multiracial, like working class constituency that we need in order to win, I think, and also is like our moral obligation to be outraged at the type of things that are happening right now in terms of utility shutoffs. But I'll cede the floor to the assembly member and see if she has additional thoughts or ideas.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, like we really have to harness the outrage towards a solution. And, as a person who now has a public platform, I really try to be very communicative and make myself available to explain a lot of things that are opaque to people. And one thing that I wanted to add was that, a good target audience for us turned out to be senior citizens who are on fixed income, who are dependent on electricity usage, right? And through our office, we do constituent services where a lot of it is helping them understand their bill and also intervening on their behalf to get attention to their bill for Central Hudson to look at it, because a lot of them think that it's just wrong. But also to make sure that these cases aren't being solved and closed and put away, but actually to also engage them in like, okay, but that's not all, right? There's like more we have to do. So I think no audience is the wrong audience, I think we just have to find a way to connect this to all of the frustrations that everybody's feeling. And the key to everything is just, there's no shortcuts. Basically, there's no shortcuts. We have to train other people to do what we're doing. We have to learn how to delegate what we're doing so that more of us can do this thing and not be frustrated that there aren't these quick results that we see. And I just want to say that, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago when we were talking about bid public renewables, and a reporter said this bill had no momentum. And all things considered, a couple of years, and we're talking about in the budget, is like a short window. Things don't happen that fast. So it's like, it's this world where you never know what effort goes to waste and what effort transpires into something really major. So you just got to try everything. But really, like, it takes a lot of patience. And I think it takes a lot of passing on your strategy and knowledge, which, like, I think a lot of us are doing. But it's key to not give up and be cynical, because that is just like knocking at your door every day, like to just give up.
For sure. No, exactly. It is crazy to think that 2 or 3 years, and it's like, so it's come so far. And yeah, I think like if any of us aren't feeling less hopeful about where you are with this, like just take that example. Like it can, it can really grow. I am going to take Kristen's question really quickly, because it's exciting to me. Is policy to change the appointment process of a PUC, something you see as worthwhile, i.e. if the PUC is appointment based, changing it to an elected body. And the reason I want to take that is because, well, one, the vast majority of public service commissions, state regulators on utilities are appointed, usually by the governor, but sometimes by state legislatures. But also because there are actually two examples recently, not of changing from an appointment process to electoral, but of making at-large elections for a public service commission districted, which is really important because like often, so this recently happened in Georgia and in Louisiana. In Louisiana, it happened way before the election and really affected the election because now in the district that was up, a queer Black socialist candidate could run in a district that he had lived in his entire life. He'd organized in his whole life. He was, this is Devontae Lewis in Louisiana. He could, represent the community he's coming from and speak to much more, much more personally. And that just wouldn't have been possible with a statewide process, and wasn't in the incumbents they had previously. They weren't calling for clean energy. They weren't calling for affordable rates affecting primarily Black homeowners, things like that. And he won, which is really exciting. And that's entirely because of that change in the election system. That happened in Georgia too. And both of these things happened because organizers have been calling for them for years and years and years, with limited success and variety of hearings and things like that. In Georgia, it happened, but like literally a month before the election. So the election is like still canceled, which is confusing, but ultimately will have similar effects of being more representative, more opportunities for progressives to have people who actually represent their our fight. Great. So I'm reading the chat, and I think this should be our last question, Johanna.
Yeah, I think we just have about a couple minutes left. So I think I know there have been so many questions, and we've only scratched the surface of what folks have in terms of questions. But maybe we should take this moment to kind of close out and thank everyone for coming and attending today. We'll make sure that everyone who attended can get access to the Zoom recording. So feel free to send it along to other folks if you think they might be interested, or feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions, ideas, thoughts, want to get involved and run campaigns, or want to push your local government to be building public renewables, because this is just like such a moment in time. We are, at this precipice. The Inflation Reduction Act passed. This is our moment to, build public renewables, take this moment and create a divergent path from what we have seen to date in renewable development, and therefore bring justice to our communities and democracy to our communities. So a huge thank you to our co-host, the Lead Locally, and John here. And again, also huge thank you for the organizing work that you're doing, the campaigning you're doing on the ground, Assemblymember Shrestha. It's so incredible, exciting to see how this campaign has grown, and the possibilities seem like they're just at the precipice here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Great. Bye-bye.